What's up, guys? Welcome to the third installment of The War Room. That's war with two R's, where we talk about weed arrests and the ridiculous regulations that cause them. We also talk about the ridiculous regulations that prevent people from operating in this emerging cannabis industry. By the time you watch this, it will be Sunday, January 26th, the day after the Libertarian State Convention in Arizona. For those of you who follow me on Facebook, you'll know that I am the director of Stoners for Kokesh and the Southwest Regional Coordinator for Mr. Kokesh's presidential campaign. I don't like to get political on my podcast, but I'm excited. And since we're kind of like in the future here and it's actually Thursday, but you aren't seeing this till Sunday, I really wish I could give you an update. Adam won in Georgia. So positive steps forward to freedom. You guys go to kokeshforpresident.com to check out his platform. If you're somebody like me who's been living under the tyranny of prohibition for your entire life, you are probably tired of politics, tired of the two-party system pulling you back and forth and giving you limited availability to things and telling you what you can and can't put in your bodies. I'm the same way. I hate politics. But this is kind of an anti-political campaign, so I really invite you all to check it out. And I'll stop there because, again, this is about weed arrests and the ridiculous regulations that cause them. You are watching The War Room, and I am G.I. Mary Jane, and we're going to hop right into the news here. I mentioned in the opener there that not only do these ridiculous regulations cage human beings and take their money and destroy their property every day to the tune of one arrest every 50 seconds, but they also make it very difficult for people to operate legally within this cannabis space. One thing that any cannabis user that's a registered patient or a cannabis dispensary, cultivator, or anybody within the industry that has cannabis on hand does not have the freedom of, like every other American, is the right to bear arms. Why? Because since cannabis is federally illegal, owning a cannabis business or being a medical patient is technically admitting to a federal crime. Therefore, your gun rights are taken away. So even though we have some cannabis rights, we're still being chosen to pick one over the other. And this news story out of Oklahoma comes from Oklahoma's News 4. This was published on January 20th by Jessica Bruno. Marijuana grow owner shoots suspect during attempted burglary. We don't like violence. But when your property and your family and your well-being are at stake, self-defense is something that we all, as Americans, have the right to utilize, which is why we have the right to bear arms, and our forefathers put that in. So this happened in Oklahoma City. Says a medical marijuana grow owner said he shot at two burglars, hitting one of them when they returned to his business for a second time. So these guys tried to break in twice. I'm going to go down a little bit in the article. The owner said that they came in through the back door, they used a hammer, and they broke a lockbox. Apparently, this owner had a lockbox on the back of his dispensary, or front, who knows, because he had ongoing construction going on, and the builders needed to get in and out. Well, these thieves, these petty thieves, these are actual criminals, not cannabis smokers. The quote says, they drive around the building a couple of times after breaking into the lockbox. They drive around the building a couple of times, make sure there's nobody there. They use the key to get in the back door. It's not even like 2 minutes. You can tell that they're professionals. So that's a quote directly from the owner, who wished to remain nameless. And I can't say that I blame him, considering the severity or the possible severity of what he might face after this act of defending himself. He says in those few minutes that the two thieves snatched about $1,500 worth of tools and then made a run for it. He was reluctant, obviously, having no protection, and knowing that the perpetrators still had their hands on the key. He didn't have time to change locks. I'm sure there's some sort of regulation in place in Oklahoma that says you can't change the locks to your facility or something crazy without communicating with the Cannabis Commission first, which, of course, nothing you do with the government ever takes less than 30 to 90 days. Let's be realistic. In a lot of states, I don't know if you guys know this, but the Cannabis Commissions must have 24-hour access to everybody's security camera. So there's a zero privacy in this industry. And it seems that there's zero protection too. So it's a bit bewildering. So considering that this owner knew that these two perpetrators still had the key in their possession and could come back and enter at any time, he decided to camp out at night with his trusty firearm. He hung out in his store, and it says here one suspect, well, that they tried to break back in, at which point he opened fire. One suspect was hit by the bullets, and the two allegedly took off. So we've got 3 people, 1 hit by a bullet. Police say not too long after that, someone showed up to a hospital in Del City with a gunshot wound in the back and a bullet lodged in their arm. Police believe that that person is one of the suspects. However, no one is in custody at this time. Now, this coming just a few days after the big gun rally in Virginia, I don't want to cross civil rights issues here, but it's clearly a hot topic. It's one that hits the cannabis community, again, very hard because everybody in the industry and patients alike are asked to choose one freedom over the other. I applaud this man for protecting his property. I'm not a proponent of shooting somebody in the back, but I was not there. I don't know what's happening. I don't know whether he reached out to authorities and was offered no help. There's very little information in this story, and I will be following it to see if anything else unfolds. But what my fear is here is this man who is operating in the cannabis space and taking a huge pay cut from any other industry in America, simply to provide a service of natural healing for his community, was faced with the situation where he was being threatened. He chose to defend himself with a firearm, didn't take anybody's life, thankfully. We don't like loss of life no matter what. I don't want to speak for you guys, but it's just me. But now I wonder what's going to happen. And this is probably why he's remaining nameless, and who knows if he even reported the robbery to authorities, because he could be charged with a federal crime for having a firearm inside of that dispensary, which, if you work at a bank or a liquor store, a store that sells a substance more dangerous than cannabis, or hell, even a library. Actually, I think libraries are excluded because they're federal property. But you can have a firearm. You have the right to protect your property. In the cannabis space, this is not a thing. So even though we are seeing emerging laws and decriminalization and legalities, we're not there yet. And let's be real, America, we're not children. We don't need all this strict regulation. We know how to work in this capitalistic society that we live in. And it's just a shame. It's a shame that I'm even worried enough to have to report this story. It should be just like a, hey, great job defending your business, buddy, and no one should bat an eye, and we should move on. The police should investigate it, charge the thieves with a crime. But in this case, the man that was defending himself may very well end up with a charge that could see him in jail for 20 years to life. And that's the reality that we all face. Hate to start off episode number 3. I like the number 3. I hate to start off episode number 3 on a low note, so we're going to move it right on into some good news. This one comes directly from Vice. Vice.com. Troy Farah writes, the FDA just expanded access to MDMA as therapy for PTSD. Joey, MDMA is not cannabis. For those of you who don't know what MDMA is, it's a psychoactive drug, popular in the streets, in the rave scenes. And back in, what's the exact year here? 1985, it was made illegal. So this substance is something that was just recently put on the Controlled Substance Act. So again, Tony Farrow writes, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration just made it a lot easier for patients with hard-to-treat post-traumatic stress disorder to use MDMA, a popular rave drug, to treat their condition. Under an FDA program known as Expand Access, 10 sites across the nation could apply for approval to administer the drug under a doctor's supervision. Only 50 patients will be enrolled. I'm going to go ahead and post this link. It's a long article. There's a lot of information in here, and I don't have a ton of time. It's a 1-hour broadcast. So I want to get out as much as I can. It goes on to say, again, MDMA was made illegal back in 1985. Activists and psychiatrists who saw value in the psychedelic amphetamine immediately began to work to undo the ban. So right away, just like we saw with alcohol and cannabis, people stepped up to the plate and fought for the right to choose in the free country. It goes on. One organization formed in this wake was MAPS, which stands for the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. These guys have apparently been working their tiny little heinies off since 1985. And on Friday, they announced that the FDA had given them permission to enroll PTSD patients who have tried unsuccessfully to treat their conditions with MDMA psychotherapy under the Expand Access, sometimes known as compassionate use. So this is not something that's been approved by the FDA yet. It's just been moved forward. The article goes on to say that MAPS sees great potential in MDMA-assisted psychotherapy and over the years has undertaken $26.9 billion. $26.9 billion over the course of just over 30 years in lobbying and efforts and administrative costs just to try to gain our freedoms back. Now, look, let me stop right there. There is no rational, there's no reason, no rational argument that you can give me as an American citizen who was taught from childhood that I live in a free country to explain why the taxpayers, the citizens who are already paying taxes to the federal government, and the federal and state governments are supposed to function as our ears. They're supposed to listen to what we want, ignore their own moral values, and make the best decisions based on what we want. So why should we have to have spent $26.9 million through a nonprofit organization just to regain our freedom of choice? And clearly we're not done, because they're only issuing 50 permission slips. I'm not sure what word to use here. And it's even stricter than that. It goes on to say here, after the first 35 patients enroll in the expanded access program, MAPS has to submit its patient data to the FDA, and then the agency will then decide whether or not to broaden the program. So positive steps forward, right? At least the discussion has been opened. But back to actionable activism. You know, these people with MAPS, and I'm sure that there has been hundreds of people involved in the efforts over the years, I'm sure got tired time and time again, watching all of their efforts seemingly go unnoticed. But here we are, 35 years later. Gosh, 35 years later, and finally they're seeing some progress. So to all of you activists out there that get tired, I understand we all get tired, but never, ever, ever stop persevering, because everything you do makes a change in the future. Even if it's one small little change within your community or just even your neighborhood. As you make those small changes, it opens up the eyes of the masses. And when the people with the resources and the money, because let's face it, unfortunately in the society we live in right now, the only thing that gets anything done is money. Hopefully we can change that in the coming generation here. But all those little changes that you make as an activist, and you sit back and you say, God, if I only had this resource or that resource, if I only had, that extra $1,000 from my sponsors, or if I only had this, and I see a lot of people get bitter on Facebook about it. Don't. Everything you do makes a difference. If you change the mind of one person, or even just begin to change the mind of one person, your actions are worth every bit of the change that we're going to see from that. And we're going to cut the news short this week because coming up next, a very special activist spotlight of the week that was shot on site right here in Colorado Springs at Studio A64. And what is Studio A64? Well, you're going to have to stay tuned to find out. We talk about psychedelics and stuff, so make sure you're there.
Hi, my name is Pastor Peter Yapel, and I am the New York State and Traveling Chapter Coordinator of the Human Solution International, the owner and co-host of Can We Talk 420 Radio and TV, and I'm the creator of the Walk for Change. The walk was organized by a group of freethinkers from different communities, and we are asking all groups with a cause and all individuals in search of a better way to join us in this epic peaceful march to new legislation with common sense solutions to our nation's issues and to end cannabis prohibition. www.walk4change.us. Be part of the solution.
What's up, guys? It's that time again, time for the activist spotlight of the week. And this week, we've got a little special for you. I am here live with Anthony, who's going to introduce himself in a minute from Studio A64 in beautiful Colorado Springs. What is Studio A64? Well, it's a consumption lounge because smoking cannabis in public does not create some riot scene like some of these states would like to believe. So believe it or not, we can actually consume here. And they have milkshakes, and they have coffee, and they have smoothies, and they have everything that people who love nature love. I mean, are you down? You wanna spark up this split?
Yeah, I'm pretty down.
I told you before we started recording, I make these leafy keepy spliffs. I had this argument with somebody the other day. Does the word spliff, does that definitely indicate that there's tobacco, or does it just mean that there's two different substances?
It was always my understanding that it was tobacco.
See, that's what I thought too. And I looked up on like Urban Dictionary, and there's so many different. I don't know. So that's the question of the week. You guys email info@platoon420.com and tell me what you think a spliff actually means. So these have the trim from sugar leaves. From a home grow and the fresh keef in there, because why would we want to waste anything? So I'm going to spark this up. And Anthony, you do a ton of great work for the natural medicine community in terms of decriminalizing other substances besides cannabis. And while I get this going, I'll let you tell everybody about yourself.
All right, thank you very much for the intro. My name is Anthony Caballero. I started the Psychedelic Club at UCCS. That I started with the intention to inform, to inform the student populace as well as anyone interested about the re-emerging use of psychedelics in our current society. Because, as we've learned, the D.A.R.R generation are just ignoring it. It hasn't worked out. And so I figured if we can educate people and, give harm reduction resources, and so that's one of our biggest things is we'd like to provide harm reduction resources. Just recently, one of our biggest, in my eyes, one of the biggest achievements we had was we actually had a positive on a fentanyl test kit that we gave out to the community. We actually found a positive. And I forwarded that to a news reporter at KKTV who said that she'll pass this along. And so, I mean, just that, just the fact that, I'm hoping that got to, the right people, but I also reached out to CSPD and let them know, because if you keep up with the news, there's a press release in Denver that made the fentanyl, everyone aware that it was in Denver. But the things that, the press releases that we don't see is that it's on our streets as well. And this was an oxycodone pill. And so, one of the biggest reasons I started the club was, I really want people to test their substances, because that's the best way to go about it. Do your research and test your substances. And so that's what we do a lot at campuses is you have meetings. And so we usually have bi-weekly meetings where I'll do a deep dive on a substance. So for example, if it's psilocybin, I'll just go through the entire history and then I'll show research. We'll, bring up the floor for discussion, opinions, and it's also, it's a cool thing since I've started it, we've had to be flexible because we want it to be a good space for people to come. And we actually had someone come in and just tell us about this experience he had, a very challenging experience he had on, I believe it was LSD. And this was the first time he'd ever told someone, and the look of relief on his face for him to be like, oh wow, these people, you know, can relate in a way, was so like, it looked, you know, liberating for him. And so just to see things like that, as well as people come up and just, you know, be genuinely curious and, you know, want to like educate themselves, because, you know, I mean, it's all over the news, and so don't let it be a mystery, you know, reach out, you know, get that itch out of your head, find out more, you know, because that's the best way to go about it and the best way to stay educated. You know, you don't have to be for it, you don't have to support it, but if you can educate yourself, that way when you see things on TV that say, you know, ridiculous claims, I believe one of the deputy AGs said it was like one of the most dangerous drugs. And you know, we hear these things all the time, marijuana in particular is what was mentioned, but I mean, my hope is that if we can show people the research, you know, we can start changing the perspective. And that's my biggest reason. But I guess one of my precursors to starting that was, you know, I served in the Army from 2010 to 2014 in the infantry. During that time, I was in 2011. I got blown up twice by 2 IEDs, and so I had a TBI, you know, which is a traumatic brain injury, so just like a concussion. And so from 2011, you know, I knew I had changed, but I hadn't. So in the Army, right, it was almost like a social thing. It was like you go out to drink, right? You go out to drink to deal with anything, to de-stress, you know. Like I'd heard about marijuana, I did it in high school, but nothing, it wasn't available to me.
Yeah, it wasn't available to a lot of people. Or like so you mentioned the D.A.R.R. generation. You had a bunch of kids who were told that if you smoke a joint that you'll, you know, you could die, or the claims were, you're from my generation. The drug classes are ridiculous. And then for a lot of kids, when they tried cannabis for the first time and they realized that the health teacher was totally bullshitting them, then they assume that the fentanyl's not as dangerous and the heroin's not as dangerous, and you know, these other harder drugs that really are, and it gives them more of, let me rephrase it. It gives them less of a fear to try those things because they assume that the lies are going to be consistent with those substances as others. I remember joking around in my 20s with some friends. Something I said, it's like they shouldn't teach you not to do drugs in school. They should teach you how to do drugs responsibly in school. And everybody laughed, but no, that's exactly right. We're all going to be faced with these substances. I don't care what town you're in, whether you're in Denver, whether you're up in the mountains in Guffey, or whether you're in Baltimore City. You're going to come across the same substances, and you need to know exactly what they're going to do to you, what they may not do to you, the harm they may cause, and the help, the benefit you might get from it. I did a story last week. Some kid vowed to do LSD every day, a journalist, until Vice started paying him. And the whole story was, don't do that, buddy. Like, I understand the need to be heard, but
you don't need to go.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
You're probably gonna die, you know. So you're not only educating the schools, but educating the schools, Colorado Springs University, is that the one that you mentioned?
Colorado, or the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, as well as Pikes Peak.
As well as Pikes Peak. And I mean, these are the kids that, I don't know what that generation experienced in D.A.R.R. class. I know recently D.A.R.R. removed cannabis from their list of bad drugs, but I'm not sure what those 20-somethings were lied to about.
So what I took personally from the D.A.R.R. generation that's helped me a lot is just say no, right? And so what I turned that into, like looking back on it and looking back at like the failure of, you know, prohibition in general, is like just say no when anyone asks you about it, because That was my takeaway. It was like the Dare generation was teaching us to just be in the psychedelic closet, essentially, and so that's why we see the reemergence, and we see people coming out. Michael Pollan, famous author, talks about food and agriculture and how it's a living system, and then comes with this book about psychedelics and just throws mainstream readers into a loop. And that's really what's helped us a lot, is just that exposure. But I mean, I like to say, at our club, we don't only focus on the research, because we tell people, like, MDMA, like everyone's asked me, because I've had some people that, they either think I'm very biased in terms of being very pro, and they come up to me like, so what do you think about this substance? And MDMA in particular was one. And so I was very blunt with them. I was like, there's a lot of research showing good for depression, for PTSD, but it's neurotoxic if you take it too much. If you don't dose it right, you're gonna get serotonin depleted, and so you're gonna get the blues. And so if you don't do it correctly, if you don't take the right supplements to reestablish your serotonin, like 5-HTP or 5-HTP, that's these are the type of harm reduction things we can tell people. Because if you're gonna experiment, why not do it correctly, so that you don't have, because you don't want to experience something that everyone's, the downside of the exposures. Everyone thinks oh, I can just do it however, and I'll have that same experience.
And people think that about pharmaceuticals, though, too. I mean, unfortunately, even though you give them instructions, even the doctors don't take into account that everybody's body is different, and you have to adjust things to people's systems. So you get a bottle of oxycodone, say, and it's the same dosage, the same amount, the same recommendation for somebody my size, your size, or 300 pounds, and it's just... It's off. So yeah, I think harm reduction, that's great. Hopefully it'll start a movement in the pharmaceutical industry too. Because I always say, I'm not a fan of pills. They don't work for me. They just don't. I just had 2 teeth extracted. I took the Tylenol 3. I think they gave me 10 of them. I have most of them back. I took 2, and then it was RSO from there on out. But that's just me. It's not going to work for somebody else, and we don't need a pill shame. We need to. I like that. What a novel idea. Be truthful and tell everybody the pros and cons and let them make their own decisions, I think, at the end of the day. And your group's the Psychedelic Club of Colorado Springs, correct? And did you say you're starting to work with Decrim Nature?
Yeah, so we're trying to get Decriminalize Nature, which started in Oakland and, went to Chicago, and I believe there's one more that I can't remember. But it's all open source, and so it's a group of people working together essentially in the community that hear this, or at least that are keeping up with it and feel really passionate. And so there's communities forming around this, and so all this paperwork is open source, anyone can get it, right? And so essentially all you'd have to do is tweak it, but I mean, it's easy to say all these things, but it does take a lot of involvement, right? So you have to go speak to your city leaders as much as, I mean, you'd be surprised at how once you get up and just all you have to do is find the times, right? Find the times when there's a general public meeting, and go and just have your voice heard. Even just do it to practice, because they're gonna listen, and if you can get through to them, I mean, that's what people need to do.
It's powerful, and it's easy. I think a lot of people are intimidated. I come from Maryland. I did a lot of lobbying on the state and federal level, being right there next to DC, and communicate with the representatives. And even when I started back in 2016, the anxiety was weird. It's like you felt like you were calling your principal or something. No, these people, they're just like me and you. And we forget that they work for us. Their job is to be our voice. So if we as citizens don't communicate with our representatives and tell them what we think is best for our community, then they don't know they're working all day. They're unfortunately got to disconnect from society because of the demand of their job. But I find, and most of them, even the ones who wouldn't agree to, say, a cannabis bill, but it was all for politics reasons, they would still level with you and have a real conversation and acknowledge the fact that, yes, it's not something that's harmful, but because blah, 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 left, right, no, I can't, okay, fine. But the conversation, they're still productive because you're educating these people. Outreach and education is everything, and like, huge thank you to you for what you do
Thank you.
in educating the community here. I think it's important to, and you're keeping a small focus. You were talking about the steps towards decriminalization. I know they did that in Denver for psilocybin, and you're trying to do the same thing down here in Colorado Springs, but it's through the police department rather than through the government process. Is that correct? Could you explain that to me again?
So the resolution process?
Yes, the resolution.
So the resolution process from decriminalized nature, essentially, what a resolution does is it's not like a bill or it's not something added to a law, but it's something that, you know, the city recognizes the people. They recognize the people as wanting something, you know, so bad that, you know, it's a process, right? So you have to fill out the paperwork, you have to provide research to back, you know, the reasonings that you're having for whatever, you know, I guess area you live in. Because one advantage we have here in Colorado Springs is that we have, you know, a big veteran community, and we, like, that's a good way just to be able to, you know, break that hold, or that, you know, whatever you want to call it, that keeps people from actually, you know, at least being open-minded, or just, you know, at least hearing about it, you know, without being uncomfortable, you know, because like some people, when they hear about that in public, you know, when I'm doing my meetings, you know, it's very uncomfortable because they're like, you know, this is very taboo, this isn't normal, what are you doing here?
My dad would be so mad, right? Like, yeah, just it's this crazy, and it's programmed in on us. So I mean, to anybody out there who's uncomfortable about cannabis, mushrooms, LSD, heroin, fentanyl, any of these things, you know, some are bad, some are good. Some are actually good in smaller doses than what are being used on the street. So really getting down to the nitty gritty and openly talking like this, and not being afraid of, you know, being able to say, oh, hey, here's what I experienced when I did mescaline. Being able to say that without the fear of some cops knocking down your door and putting you in handcuffs just for saying that you used a substance, because you didn't hurt anybody. Breaking through that is going to, I mean, just kind of kickstart the evolution of this educational revolution. Wow, I'm a public, isn't it?
That's awesome.
Well, that's great, man. Keep doing what you're doing. The local focus is awesome because every state is different. What's good for the goose is not good for the gander, and that goes down to a county level. You know, Colorado is a big state, and how people live here is very different from how they live in Trinidad or Boulder or Denver. And having these small groups that are not trying to focus on the big picture, even though of course we all just want the big picture to change quickly. But it's getting that support, and when the big groups do form and do get to the big picture, all this little work, nothing's going to be able to happen without that. So, I mean, thank you on behalf of the entire freedom community. You know, I don't understand why My Body, My Choice stopped at abortion. That was a huge thing, a huge victory for people. But we still can't decide what plants to grow or use. Awesome. Well, I mean, since we're here, I usually do a segment towards the end of the show called Strain of the Week. Would you like to join me on that?
Oh, yes, please.
And sample some of this awesome what I have today. It's Grant Farms again. I went there, they had a great deal. It's like $9 for an ounce.
Nice.
Colorado's medical market is incredible. So I don't need to push them again, but you know. But I got some Star Dog, which is a real strong sativa, and a real sativa guy like me. Oh, is it 420 right now? My goodness. It's 4:20, and we're getting ready to do the strain of the week at Studio A64. So, as we're rolling around to it, wait, is it exactly? We have 2 minutes. So, why don't you tell everybody how to get a hold of you on social media, website, how do they get involved? It looks like you got a lot of work coming up.
Yeah, so we got a Facebook page that you can like, where we share most of our research articles, and we also got a closed page that's just essentially, the page but in a closed page environment. And so essentially, like, all the events that we hold events at like kava bars, for the community. Usually those go pretty well. But I mean, reach out to me on Facebook, and if you look on the closed page, one of the pinned posts has all 3 of my emails that I can be reached at. Yeah, email is the best way to get hold of me. Just write the page. I'm always on the page, so I pride myself in how quick I get back to you.
Yeah, he's fast.
So,
he's fast. We have 1 minute left. Your information is also going to be up at platoon420.com for the activist spotlight tab of the week. So everybody will be able to get a hold of you there. I'm going to let you do the honors. It's 4:19. I'm sure this fine gentleman in the background will let us know it's funny. But I'm going to look. I'm gonna take this up to the camera, and then I'm gonna end up editing in a picture of it anyway. But whatever. This is fun, right? But this is again Star Dog. Actually, my camera quality is not that bad, is it?
No,
it's good. It's good. So that's what we're getting ready to smoke. And then I've also got a little bit sample of the old homegrown here.
Let's get this
It's so great to be able to just be in a room with people, like you said, shamelessly smoking. It's not a big deal here in Colorado Springs. These people are hearing me, they're like, what the fuck is this girl talking about? Who gives a shit? Well, I mean, there are millions of people across the country that don't even understand this freedom and are terrified to even smoke in their living room. It's insane.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the Star Dog?
It is very tasty. Yeah, really tasty.
It's real smooth. It's real smooth. I don't know. I need that focus throughout the day. They wanted to give me Ritalin and Adderall, but I said no, thank goodness. So this tea is kind of working that same way, I think. Yeah, this one's really decent. Very earthy. I don't know. My palate is not clean right now because of the leafy. What did you think of this thing? Honest assessment.
Yeah, that thing really got me good.
It works, right?
It's good.
And it's just, it's sort of, it's sugar leaf.
Delicious.
Sugar leaf and ghee.
So smooth.
That's it. So if you're somebody who is able to home grow, and you are going to throw away, and no one throws away their key. It's just, we all use that, right? Usually sprinkle on top of the bowl or something, right? Throw it away. But it's expensive these days, so if you're not using your sugar leaf for pressing oils or something, damn it, I shouldn't have said that out loud. I need to trademark it. So yeah, I did not look up the terpene profile on this. What do you think about that? Since we're talking, we crossed from activist of the week to strain of the week.
Yeah.
They don't list the terpene profiles on your cannabis in Colorado. What are your thoughts on it? Are you a terpene guy or?
So I think Crystal in the community.
Mm-hmm.
I think she does a very good job of bringing the attention needed and the importance of knowing that sort of information. But I don't think we can get there because people are satisfied enough with THC percentage, CBD percentage, and that's what they go off of because that's normally what people, I guess it's the satisfaction that just knowing what the psychoactive chemical is and what percentage, that's all I need to know.
Right.
And so people don't bother to look deeper.
Yeah, I mean, but terpenes are responsible. Like I have Crohn's disease, so the caryophyllene is what I need, and you can taste that kind of peppery tinge, and that's the caryophyllene. And now, I was a strain snob from a very early age. I'm gonna stop there in case my federal agent's watching. But I had access to different strains, and I loved cheese. I loved my my chem dog. And come to find out, once in Maryland, they let you see the terpenes. In fact, it's required. Everything that's caryophyllene. And then I look up, well, what the hell is caryophyllene? And it's what's responsible for anti-inflammatory. It has the anti-inflammatory properties. Let me rephrase that. Which is exactly what my GI tract needs. You guys get it now? GI, Mary Jane.
You're so stupid.
Tons of caryophyllene. Myrcene kind of makes you like sleepy, more relaxed than sleepy, and limonene is huge for anxiety and stress relief. So this is mostly a caryophyllene strain, which is what gives you that energizing, racy. And some people can't do that. Like I know a lot of people, they smoke sativa, they're in a corner shaking and like convulsing. So I think that's why it's important to do the terpenes too, because it's not the cannabis that's doing that to them. It's one of these terpenes. There's a lot of people who are allergic to pine, just in general. Pine is an allergy, so they can't eat pine nuts or whatever. Well, there's pinene in a lot of cannabis strains, and if they smoke a strain with pinene, they're going to be having a bad time. So I have to assume that a lot of people who may have tried cannabis for the first time have a bad experience, may not have a bad experience if they were privy to seeing these terpenes. So.
Yeah.
Something to think about. I know Colorado Normal is working on that within the industry. Last I spoke to them, we'll have them on. Soon as I'm able to get them on. But yeah, that's what they're trying to do, is communicate with the dispensaries themselves. Again, so let's not pass bills. Let's just talk rationally to these people and say, hey, here's what we want. It's only going to cost you guys this much more. We'll advocate for you if you go ahead and make this information available. And, that's where it needs to start. So we are running out of time here, though. Is there any other information that you want to get out that's pertinent? Where again, they'll be able to find your information at platoon420.com, get you directly linked to all of the Colorado Springs Psychedelic Club Facebook pages, websites, and the like. Do you guys have any events coming up?
We're gonna do a back to school meeting for Pikes Peak as well as UCCS, and then we'll also be at a club fair. I just need to get the dates on that. So those dates will be updated soon. Again, it's all at Facebook at Psychedelic Club at Colorado Springs, of Colorado Springs. So,
Perfect.
yeah, thank you again for having me. And I mean, it's awesome. You know, I think it's awesome that we're here today talking about this and being able, you know, to talk about it. And I mean, it's just awesome.
Yeah, this is what freedom looks like. This is what everybody is scared about. I'm not really sure why.
People jabbing out.
Yeah, oh my gosh, everybody's having a good time, and you know, no one's arguing over a football game or you know whatever they do in the bars. All right, man. Well, thank you. Let's go see if we can get some footage of this guy on the guitar. Thank you guys. See you then.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity.
Weed! Free the weed! Free the weed! Free the weed!
What's up, you guys? Commander-in-Chief coming to you from the Garden of Freedom. We are on location for today's special We, the Cannabis People. Thanks for tuning in and hanging in with us through the show. I know we did the segments a little backwards, but as you can see, I am on the road out here hunting for our freedom with what we hope will be America's last president. I'm not going to get political. I promised you guys that, and I'm going to stick to it. But make sure you visit thefreedomline.com to find out this awesome way for us to finally end federal prohibition once and for all and regain our freedoms. So today on We, the Cannabis People, I had hoped to speak to an inmate But we are going to save that for next week because you know how the prison system is. Very limited time, hard to schedule these things. So he's going to be calling us on Sunday, something to look forward to next week. But some exciting news on January 22nd, the Chicago Sun-Times and just about every other media outlet out there reported some exciting news. We, the cannabis people, are finally fighting back. Our voices need to be heard, and we're being loud, and I encourage you guys to continue this productive activism in 2020 as we move forward. So the Chicago Sun-Times reported on January the 22nd, Tom Schuba says, legal pot peddlers should be allowed to sell at farmers markets on street corners, Black activists say. Not really sure why we're separating the people, we, the cannabis people, into two separate categories or any kind of categories here, Black, white. I'm pretty sure that Black, Hispanic, white, gay, straight, and dog activists would agree that cannabis, being a produce that's never killed anybody in the history of its existence, should be easily available to us right there at our local farmers market, and give the small business community, the small farmers community, time to shine. So let's see what this says. A group of community activists led by violence interrupter T.O. Hardiman called on lawmakers Wednesday to permit the sale of legal pot in public places as a way to bolster minority participation in the city's overwhelming white cannabis industry. Well, there you go. Thank you, Chicago Sun-Times, for answering mine and everybody else's question. To go along with it, the Washington Post published an article today that notes most cannabis dealers are white. However, the Black community is more likely and is arrested more frequently than that in the white community. So the discrimination is real, and it started back in 1937 as a way to keep that minority community down. Good old Harry Anslinger started it, and Jeff Sessions tried to keep it alive. Now that we're noticing it, now that the discrimination and injustice has spread out to the entire cannabis community, we need to come together with our brothers and sisters and do something against this. So I'm glad that somebody's finally taking a stand. Let's see what Hardiman said. This way, you can take the criminal element out of selling marijuana and allow these young guys to make some legal money. And then you can help reduce unemployment in the African-American community. Again, I want to extend that to the entire community. The African-American community is so disproportionately affected by the laws of prohibition. And I'm so happy that an actionable group is stepping up. We all need to do the same. It is time to come together with our brothers and sisters. Gosh, I don't want to sound like some Vietnam era, like rally person, but that is the spirit that we all possess. Our grandparents, our mothers, our fathers, they started this revolution back in the hippie revolution. And right now, people are starting to wake up. We all need to speak as boldly as Hardiman and his group in saying that cannabis should not be regulated to the extent that alcohol and tobacco is. If you ask me personally, I don't think alcohol and tobacco should be regulated as strictly as they are. However, there is no way you can put cannabis and those two substances in the same category and try to tell me that you're not discriminating against an entire industry. So, to Mr. Hardiman and your group doing what you can in Chicago, I salute you and thank you. And we will be following this story to see how it unfolds and see what kind of freedoms that people in Chicago may be able to inherit or to take back through these actions. And next, the entire country. You guys keep fighting, keep your spirits high, keep speaking out. Cannabis is not something we should be ashamed about. It is not something we should be scared of. And it is up to us to lead by example and pass that compassion. Thanks for tuning in to another War Room. I'm going to be on the road with Team End the Fed and Adam Kokesh here. Again, thefreedomline.com. You can get more information on that if you want to get involved in this very, very effective and immediate way of ending prohibition. You can reach out to me. we're going to be on the road. So make sure you tune in next week to see where we're reporting from. You guys keep passing that compassion. Special thank you to Studio A64 for hosting us, the Psychedelic Club of Colorado Springs for their amazing efforts and outreach, the Walk for Change. Visit www.walk4change.us and the Coffee Party USA. If you're listening to us on Blog Talk Radio, be sure to subscribe to YouTube to see the visuals.